not anymore out of control.
So let's
or something.
come here. How is all this happening? How are these bases being hit? From where is that's Iran there? You can see at the back. How is this happening? Where are they going from, these missiles?
These missiles are coming from Western Iran, not Western Iran. This would be here, Zakoduhov. This is still in Iraq.
Right.
So this area.
Can we?
Just a second.
Can we bring this down? Oh, sorry.
Turn off this.
Yes.
So and then.
Yeah.
Opa. Ah, God.
There we go. Yeah. That's it.
So,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So this is where it's coming from.
They are hit from here.
Yes.
And this is now particularly characteristic, particularly important, because Israelis are claiming they have destroyed this and that military or missile base. And still, obviously, the Iranians have the ability to fire shorter-ranged ballistic missiles at bases in the Dana area and in Cyprus area.
Yes.
So this is very important. Why? Because it means they are not knocked out yet. Also, the fact that we have seen UAVs flying over Shiraz and Tehran, but no combat aircraft of either the US Air Force or US Navy or Israeli Air Force, means they are still limited to operating just UAVs over, for example, Tehran and Esfahan. So this means they are not flying their jets much deeper over Iran.
Let's just connect with Jonathan Conricus, who was the former IDF spokesperson. Let's go straight across to him. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for speaking to us. I want to talk to you a little bit about the end game, so to speak. Are we in that phase where we are moving towards an end game? Has this war and the Iranian resistance surprised Israel and the United States? What are you seeing from Israel's perspective, sir?
Yes, hello again. I think to speak about endgame after less than two days of war, it's a bit premature. But I think we could conservatively say that things are perhaps moving in the right direction. Moving in the right direction in the terms of the fact that the former so-called supreme leader and 40 of his senior military and political advisors and commanders are no longer going to oppress the Iranian people. That's a good thing. From the fact that Israel has full freedom of action in Iranian skies, including over Tehran and any location where we need to strike targets. The IDF just announced that it has dropped more than 100 pieces of ordnance from fixed-wing aircraft in various places of Iran, including Tehran. That announcement came out a few hours ago. You perhaps missed it in studio. But I'd say that the surprising part, there are a few things that are surprising here in terms of Iran and the environment. One, the relatively limited amount of ballistic missiles that the Iranians managed to fire. We anticipated more. We were bracing ourselves for salvos of dozens of missiles simultaneously and hundreds of missiles per day. And I'm very happy to say that we are far from that. We still have to investigate what the reason is. Maybe they are conserving their firepower, or maybe they're not able to fire because Israel and the US have struck many of their missile launchers and they're struggling to fire. I am also surprised by Iran's strategy to kill civilians all across the Middle East. I think it's a strategy that it's not going to be very beneficial for them. Killing civilians in Israel is not a surprise and it's not a new thing. That's what the Iranian regime does. But killing Arab Muslims in Qatar, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, firing at Jordan, that's a very odd choice of strategy for the Iranians, one that I think will eventually backfire. So summing this up, I think good early progress from let's say the representatives of the brave free world against this oppressive regime, but we are far, far from anywhere near a finish line or anywhere where we can speak about the concluding or end game.
Very quickly, Colonel Conricus, you said that this would backfire, this strategy of targeting other Gulf nations. In what way will it backfire on Iran? What is expected to happen?
Yeah, I assume that what the Iranian regime expected was that by firing at various countries in the region, they would, in their weakness, cower before the Iranians and apply pressure on America in order to stop the war. That doesn't seem to be the case. And what the Gulf nations have said, joint statement by the GCC ministers and also other communiques from the UAE and from Saudi is, well, we don't like being fired at. We don't like our civilians being targeted. This is blatant aggression from Iran. And we reserve the right, and we actually are now thinking about actually defending ourselves, which is, far below what I would expect any sovereign country to do when fired upon. When somebody fires at you, you retaliate. That's how you keep yourself safe. But at least they're moving into that direction. Iran is running out of strategic support, and by its own action, by its own aggression, is now finding itself quite alone. Russia, which I'm sure the Iranians wanted and thought would come to their help, really isn't. Russia is busy trying to occupy Ukraine and is suffering from its own endeavors and misfortunes, military ones. China seems not to be interested enough in order to jeopardize their own interest. And I'm quite sure that there's some behind-the-scenes deal that has been made between the US and China regarding export of oil in order to compensate for what the Chinese were buying illicitly from Iran before that. And currently, Iran, by its actions, by its aggression, they find themselves quite alone, and they are deepening their isolation by their actions. Doesn't look to be a very smart move, and all the charming and all the diplomatic rhetoric and all the propaganda that they'll be able to spin out won't undo that reality.
But the idea was to force, the idea of the preemptive strikes was to force or soften the Iranian regime enough that it would come back to the table. It's refusing to do so, despite the decapitation strikes, despite 50 or 60 of their top commanders gone, including the Ayatollah, and most of their leadership wiped out. They seem to be hunkering down. Why is this happening?
I don't know what you base the premise of the question on, that was the desired outcome or the intent. I don't think that it was. I think that the intent of this operation is to bring the Iranian regime to its knees and eventually make it so weak so that it can be overthrown by the Iranian people. That, I think, is the desired outcome. If the regime would be smart enough in its instincts of self-preservation to come to the Americans and say, okay, you know what? We won't enrich on Iranian soil. We will immediately stop firing ballistic missiles and producing them. And we will immediately cease in supporting terror organizations and building terror networks around Western Asia. I'm sure that the US would find that quite okay to make a deal and to say, okay, we'll call off the war. I doubt that the Iranian regime will do that because they are filled with hubris, with pride, and it's clouding their judgment. And from an Israeli perspective, what Israel is now pursuing, in my mind, way, way too late in terms of the amount of aggression that we have sustained from the Iranian regime over at least 3 decades. What Israel is doing now is finally returning and taking initiative against the Iranian regime and attacking them because they have been managing an indirect war against Israel and actively pursuing our destruction. And that's the framework. Will the Iranians come to the table and, plead for a ceasefire, capitulation? That will probably save them a lot of effort. I doubt that they will, and judging by what Larijani, last man standing or current man standing, is saying or tweeting, they're not inclined to do so.
Well, Colonel Conricus, what we're also seeing is that some of these Gulf countries that are aligned with America are now going into what is known as lockdown mode, economic lockdown mode. Can they sustain, or will they say, well, maybe if this stretches on a few too many days, we're going to start bleeding economically, the expats that came to work will feel a little uneasy, and perhaps their economic prospects might begin to dim. Is there a possibility that that could change calculations on the ground as far as Israel and America are concerned?
I think the Iranian regime will suffer more, bleed more economically and actually than what these countries will, and the amount of damage that the Iranian regime will sustain every day of this war is far more than what these Gulf countries will have to deal with. Granted, These countries are not battle hardened. They do not have the DNA of fighters. They do not have the DNA of resilience. They have the DNA of oil-rich countries that have flourishing financial systems as a result of it, and it's a different culture. But at the end of the day, I think the balance of power here is one where every day that goes by, the Iranian regime will be weakened. Its capabilities will be really limited in terms of what they can do. And I don't think that they can play a long and patient waiting game, because at the end of the fighting, there will be the Iranian people. The Iranian people, the moment the bombs stop flying, will, in my assessment, take to the streets and seek to free themselves from the yoke of the Iranian regime and its oppression. So playing a waiting game, not entirely sure that that's a good strategy for the Iranians either.
Colonel Conricus, I have to ask you this, because you said that there has been now air dominance that has been maintained by Israel and the United States. Yet we're seeing bases of the United States in Turkey and in Kirchik, even in Cyprus, where there was an attempt to knock out a British base. There have been obvious strikes on other US bases in the region. We don't quite know the extent of damage that they have sustained. How is this happening? How is Iran being able to sort of strike these targets? And of course, there has also been damage now in a few places in Israel, and we have those pictures in Beit Shemesh and other places. So what is making Iran capable of hitting or counter-reacting in this way?
Yeah, one issue doesn't necessarily have to do with the other. Aerial dominance is a fact. I think it would be very difficult to dispute that Israel and the US enjoy aerial dominance and superiority over Iranian skies. There are no effective air defense systems. The Russian S-300 systems have been taken out of commission long time ago by Israeli jets. Actually, most of them were destroyed in June last year, and the residual capabilities were wiped off by Israel and the US 2 days ago. So that's one thing that we can set aside. Their offensive capabilities, Iran's ability to fire missiles from bunkers, silos, all across Western Iran, mostly Western Iran, that still exists, and they do fire missiles and they dispatch drones from various bases. But every time they fire, those places are mapped by drones and by other aircraft that are currently constantly hovering above hovering in Iranian airspace. And the moment they fire, they become a target. And what we're seeing now is that the US and Israel are hunting missile launchers, and the sum of it will be that the longer the fighting will go on, based on the aerial dominance that the US and Israel enjoys, Israel and the US will be able to gradually degrade Iranian capabilities more and more. They already started at a weakened position, and they've been able to fire less than what was anticipated. And my assessment is that their capabilities will continue to be degraded more and more until very small or nominal. How long will that take? That's a business of days and weeks, I would assume, until most offensive Iranian capabilities have been dealt with. And maybe that's the despair and panic that we see in Iranian decision making, that they're lashing out, firing at Gulf countries, firing at civilians all across the Middle East, because they are understanding that they have very little time left to fire the missiles that they have.
So a couple of questions before I let you go. What is the timeline that we are looking at here? Could this become a protracted conflict, a battle of attrition? You might have Iran beginning to engage proxies. They could go asymmetric. Those are possibilities. We're already seeing visuals on our screen of how sympathetic in the Muslim world, in Pakistan, for example, elements sympathetic to Iran and its regime there are attacking US consulates. Tomorrow they might start attacking other US allies and their assets and consulates. So what is the timeline we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, for you in India, it's definitely not a newsflash to see radical Muslims do crazy things, whether it's in Pakistan or on Indian soil. and that shouldn't come as a surprise. Timeline here, I think neither the US nor Israel want or need or aspire for a protracted conflict. What you can see is high intensity military operations, aerial operations against the Iranian regime. And as anticipated, Iran's most important proxy organization that they spent 35, 40 years building, Hezbollah in Lebanon, has now joined in the fray. They are now dragging Lebanon into the war at the behest of the Iranian regime. By the way, much to the frustration of the democratically elected government in Lebanon, who are saying that Hezbollah's actions are reckless and are endangering Lebanon, which actually is very correct. And yes, you're right. There's the risk of Iran using other venues, terrorists, and other smaller capabilities in order to deflect. But that, I don't think it will make a meaningful strategic impact. And, if we focus on the core issues here, what Israel and the US are doing now is gradually degrading the Iranian regime, its ability to manage, command and control and conduct military operations. And I think within not a very long period of time, those capabilities will be degraded to such an extent that the Iranian people can actually rise up without mortal fear and actually reclaim their country. Iran will try to, use terrorism and use the dirty tricks that they usually do. But that's not news, and both the US and Israel are prepared, battle-hardened for it. There may be surprises. The Hezbollah or other Iranian proxies may get something off and may surprise either of us. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's what happens in war. But we're prepared for that. But the bottom line, when we keep our focus on the big strategic picture here, is that the sand in the hourglass is running in a very clear direction, and it is not one that is in the favor of the Iranian regime.
So I just want you to accommodate a question or two from Tom Cooper, one of the world's leading military historians. He's here with us in our studio. He's a colleague. Tom Cooper, would you like to ask Colonel Conricus a couple of questions on some of the views that he has expressed?
Well, perhaps one would be the question of semantics. I'm curious to hear how comes that when somebody from Lebanon attacks Israel, that is aggression against Israel. When somebody from Syria attacks Israel, that is aggression on Israel. But when Israel attacks somebody else, then that is self-defense, but no aggression.
Attacks Ukraine, that's aggression. And just like when, and the basis for this, for instance, the Iranians have been conducting indirect and direct warfare against Israel for the better part of 30 years. They have fired ballistic missiles at our civilians. They have manned and funded terror organizations that have killed thousands of Israelis over the years and wounded many thousands. And they are openly saying and really trying to destroy the state of Israel. So when Israel takes military action against the Islamic Republic of Iran, it is within that context. You can go back, many years and spot the first act of Iranian aggression against Israel.
I tend to come back to many years ago because it is foremost Israeli historians and journalists who are publishing books and writing about the beginnings of Hezbollah in Lebanon of the 1970s, late 1970s, Murabiton militia before Hezbollah. And they said they came into being, these Israeli historians, Israeli journalists, say both of these militias came into being because of Israeli massacres on the Shia population of southern Lebanon. So how do you explain now that Iran has started this war?
I don't really follow your train of thought here, the connection between Hezbollah and what Israel is, the attack that Israel is
because
doing
the same journalists,
on Iran.
It's very simple, because the same journalists and the same historians say that this is how Israel has started a secret war with Iran back in the early 1980s.
Oh, Israel started.
Yes.
By when militias and terrorists in Lebanon invaded into Israel in the early 1970s, attacked Israeli civilians. Israel responded by striking in Lebanon, and then afterwards Iran built a militia.
May I now use your words from
Lebanon?
earlier? You said this is a different war because you are now talking about Palestinians, while I'm talking
No,
about
I'm
Shia
talking
population
about
of southern
Lebanon.
Lebanon, which was killed
Yeah, I'm talking
by
about
dozens
Lebanon.
by Israeli armed forces.
Yeah, I'm
And
talking
then,
about Lebanon.
yes,
I'm
and you are
explaining
talking
the
about
context
Lebanon, but
which
I'm talking about Palestine. You are mixing Palestinians who were operating from
Believe
Lebanon.
me, I'm not mixing anything.
Yeah, you are you very much do. And then there are
No,
Shia of
actually
southern
am not.
Lebanon.
And
There are
actually,
Shia
very
of southern
clear.
Lebanon who have
Okay,
organized
listen,
themselves into
you're in the
Murabiton and then the
studio.
Hezbollah.
You're in the studio, so you have an obvious advantage over me, and we're not
Yeah,
going to
sure,
be
it
able
is
to speak
advantage,
over
yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
So I can happy, just if you want to ask a question, I can.
I'm
more than
asking you a
happy to
question.
answer it, but we can't have a debate because you're in studio.
I asked you a question. Why are you mixing Palestinian incursions into Israel of the early 1970s, avoiding to answer the question about Israeli massacres on Shia of southern Lebanon, and then not discussing the emergence of Murabiton and then the Hezbollah, and thus the start of the secret war between Israel and Iran, which was, according to Israeli historians and Israeli journalists, started by Israel.
Yeah, so I think you have it kind of flip side, upside down. The country, the nation state that has built terror organizations and equipped them and deployed them around our borders is Iran. Israel has not deployed any militia or terror organization in Azerbaijan, in Iraq, in Afghanistan or Pakistan.
So southern Lebanese army was also not
Okay,
militia.
Hold on,
one at a time.
Hold on, please.
Yeah, one at a time.
Let me answer.
Yeah.
Let me answer. Israel has not done that. The country that has done that is Iran. Iran has a strategy formulated by the former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, which is to build a ring of fire around Israel, equip different proxies, different useful idiots from the Iranian perspective, Lebanese Hezbollah, Gazan Hamas and Islamic Jihad, various jihadi organizations in Syria before Assad was removed, and various organizations in Iraq, and of course the Houthis in Yemen. The strategy that the Iranians built over the years was to build that ring of fire around Israel and to try to bleed Israel of internal cohesion, international support, to weaken it. And then when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, that was what was supposed to be the opening shot of the last war, the last campaign, the flood of Al-Aqsa against Israel, which is an Iranian strategy, and all of the Iranian proxies were supposed to join in the fight and defeat Israel. So the one that is conducting war is Iran. And what Israel is retaliating against that.
So, all of that we can discuss at another time. But the fact is, viewers, that the Israelis and the Americans are now quite sure that it's only a matter of time before there is going to be regime change in Iran. And that's the top headline coming out of this interview with Colonel Jonathan Conricus, because they are ready, as they are saying, to degrade the regime to the extent that the popular will of the people will rise up and complete the job, and therefore they will find liberation. Well, thank you, Colonel Conricus, for speaking with us. As always, it's great to speak with you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
We'll touch base at a later date. Thank you very much. Let me